Thank you so much, Carolyn. And good evening or good morning, good afternoon to you all over the globe. Can you all hear me all right? Could you just put something in the chat to let me know the sound is coming through? Great, thank you. If at any point it's not coming through clearly, please do put a note in the chat so that we can fix that and you can hear. Welcome to everyone. It's wonderful to see so many of you on the call and from so many different places. It's lovely to be back here doing this again. So as Carolyn said, our theme tonight, for me it's 11:30 p.m. in Sri Lanka, is there is no way to peace, peace is the way. And for our guided practice, I'd like to offer us a meditation from Thich Nhat Hanh, who offered this meditation based on his own experience of calling on the Buddha in himself as a way to be peace in situations that were really hard to be peaceful in. And he tells a story about being in Korea after giving a day of mindfulness at the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea. He gave a talk and he was about to lead a walking meditation, and he was just surrounded by a crowd of camera people shoving cameras into his face, and there was literally no place for him to walk. And he was, not sure what to do, and he just said, okay, Buddha inside, you have to come and take care of this because I don't know what to do here. And he took a breath and he released his own need to make something happen. And he just started to walk, letting the Buddha in him initiate that. And the way parted between the sea of camera people, and he was able to find a path to walk. And so he used that as an example, saying, whenever you're striving or in difficulty or things aren't going well, like another example, if you're sitting at a computer completely boggled as what to do and you can't figure out the technology of the computer, but you have a friend or, a computer whiz who can just say, move over, I'm going to, figure this out. And they do it, and you can just relax and let them do it. And he said, we should do that in our practice. Whenever we're struggling, let the Buddha in us take over and guide us and do it. And we don't have to do anything. So this meditation is born from this practice of his. So I'm going to offer us a phrase with the in-breath, a phrase with the out-breath. There's 5 exercises, so each one will get a chance to practice in silence for a little while. And I'll give you some key words, some key phrases that you can continue to practice in the silence with your breath, if that's helpful for you. If it's not helpful to connect the phrases with your breath, you can let the breath go, and relax into the experience of the phrases without the breath, or feeling your body as you recall the exercise, the key words. So you only, use the breath if it's helpful for you. Otherwise, find another way to anchor your experience with the phrases. I'm noticing there's a few comments about the fan. I'll just turn off the fan for the meditation, and we'll see how that goes. 1 second. For those who are finding it staticky, can you let me know if it's better now? And after the meditation, if it's too hot for me, I'll turn it back on. Okay. So finding a posture that works well for you, whether it's seated or standing or lying, and or moving in some way. For some of us, it's not so helpful to be still, but coming to a position that creates ease and alertness for you. Connecting to your breath, or opening to the experience of your body in this moment. Noticing where your body is making contact with whatever it's supported by, in whatever position you're in. And allowing your body to rest and to release any tension, any holding that's not helpful to you now. Inviting yourself to be here as fully as you can. Just as you are, right in this moment. Allowing a softening of the muscles in the face, the forehead, around the eyes, the jaw, the tongue. Perhaps breathing deep a few times and releasing in the face as you exhale. And breathing into the shoulders and breathing out, releasing, softening in the shoulders. Along the arms and hands, the chest and the belly, and the back. Breathing deeply into these places and exhaling, letting go. Down to the hips and the legs and the feet. Releasing, letting go. Noticing Noticing areas that feel neutral or pleasant in the body, where it's enjoyable to dwell, to rest. Giving yourself space to rest and enjoy and appreciate your body, your breath. Breathing in, I let the Buddha breathe. I let the Buddha sit. Breathing out, I don't have to breathe. I don't have to sit. Let the Buddha breathe. Let the Buddha sit. I don't have to breathe. I don't have to sit. With the in-breath, the Buddha is breathing. The Buddha is sitting. With the out-breath, I enjoy the breathing. I enjoy the sitting. Buddha is breathing. Buddha is sitting. I enjoy breathing. I enjoy the sitting. With the in-breath, the Buddha is the breathing. The Buddha is the sitting. With the out-breath, I am the breathing. I am the sitting. The Buddha is the breathing. The Buddha is the sitting. I am the breathing. I am the sitting. With the in-breath, peace and joy while breathing. With the out-breath, peace and joy while sitting. Peace and joy while breathing. Peace and joy while sitting. With the in-breath, peace is the breathing. With the out-breath, joy is the sitting. Peace is the breathing. Joy is the sitting. With the in-breath, there is just the breathing. There is just the sitting. With the out-breath, there is no one breathing. There is no one sitting. There is just the breathing. There is just the sitting. There is no one breathing. There is no one sitting. Dear friends, please continue to sit or keep whatever posture you're in if you like, or feel free to stretch and bring some movement into your body. I'm going to sing you these steps of this meditation, which a dear friend, Chi Sing, put to music. He's passed away. But you can feel free to practice with it as I sing it to you. Let the Buddha breathe. Let the Buddha sit. I don't have to breathe. I don't have to sit. The Buddha is breathing. The Buddha is sitting. I enjoy the breathing. I enjoy the sitting. The Buddha is the breathing. The Buddha Buddha is the sitting. I am the breathing. I am the sitting. There is just the breathing. There is just the sitting. There is no breather. There is no sitter. Peace and joy while breathing. Peace and joy while sitting. Peace is the breathing. Joy is the sitting. Breathing, smiling, working, playing. So take a moment to transition now, taking some deep breaths, letting yourself stretch, doing what you need to do to take care of your body. And I invite you, if you like, to write a sentence or a word in the chat if you want of how that was for you, what you experienced in that practice. And I'm actually going to also paste the exercise into the chat because I mixed up the order, and so I want you to have the order as I remembered it correctly right at the end. But there are five exercises, so I'm just putting them in the chat for you now. So yeah, feel free to share any reflections with everybody. So thank you for those who've shared. Feel free to share. I'll go on. And I think I'm fine without the fan. So I'll share for about half an hour, a little less, on this theme of how we can be peace rather than working for peace somewhere else. And this really has to do with this practice of this meditation, which is we don't have to search somewhere else for the Buddha. The Buddha is right here inside of us, and we can allow the Buddha to manifest. We can let the Buddha take over, and we can just rest. There's a story by a storyteller in the UK, Martin Shaw, and he draws on the story of Medusa, this kind of very powerful goddess in the Greek mythology. And the story of Perseus, who is tasked to go and slay her, to kill her. And her power is that if anyone looks at her, they turn to stone. So all these previous heroes who had gone with the task to destroy her ended up just, there's many, many statues of stone around her because they all turned to stone. But Perseus has a shield, and he's able to vanquish this goddess by looking at her through his shield to kill her, and he does end up slaying her, but he never looks at her directly. So Martin Shaw tells this story as a kind of parable for how we can take on the evil in the world, the work of bringing peace, that we have to do it through this mirror of this shield like Perseus did. And that for each of us, that shield, that mirror might be something different. For some of us, it's art. For some of us, it's our spiritual practice. For some of us, it's community, the things that nourish us, maybe gardening. If we don't have that shield, then when we look directly at all the terrible things happening in the world, all that's not peace, it will turn us to stone, which I interpret to be burning out, that we can no longer do our work. We freeze. We are, dried out. So we have to be careful how we pick up this work of creating peace. Otherwise, it can destroy us. And that's why this phrase, which actually comes from a peacemaker called A.J. Muste from the peace movement, this phrase, "there is no way to peace, peace is the way," is so powerful, because if we don't take peace as the way, we will be turned to stone by this work. So we have to figure out how to live with peace as the way, so that we don't kill our souls in this work. When I was a nun in the community with Thich Nhat Hanh and the monastics, we were traveling up the coast of California from the south to the north of California by bus on the day of September 11th, 2001. And we heard about the attacks, and everyone was extremely disturbed. And a group of us who were of U.S. citizenship, we got together on the back of the bus, and I remember we were planning and brainstorming how could we respond and help Ty. He was about to give a talk to 3,000 people in Berkeley, and we really were thinking, how could we, create a press release and respond. And so once we got to Northern California, we asked to see him, and we shared our plans for what we wanted to do the next day, going to our archives at Parallax Press and pulling out things that we thought would be helpful for Ty to respond and for the Sangha to respond in a public way. And he looked at us, listened to us, and he said no, very strongly. He said, "No, tomorrow we're all going to the beach." And we were sort of caught off guard. We were in this big, momentum of let's respond, let's do something about this horrible thing that happened. And our teacher is saying, "No, we're going to the beach, all of us, tomorrow." And so we went to the beach and we played and we swam, and we took time to nourish each other, to nourish ourselves. And it was very profound. And the next day after that, we went and we did all these things that we had thought to do to help Tai to get in motion to respond to this violence. But it was a huge teaching for me that you don't jump right into something, especially if you're coming from a place of anxiety and fear and maybe still some confusion. That in fact, the way to peace is to be peace, is to bring stopping and calming and pausing into your every action for peace, so that there's no distinction between who you are, the steps that you make, the words that you say, the way that you look at people, and the peace that you're wanting to bring into the world. So not coming from a place of reactivity, nourishing ourselves with what's beautiful. So when we did respond, I think we did, all of our action came more from a place of calm and peace rather than anger, fear, sadness. So, how do we work for peace while being peace? How do we plant the seeds of peace in situations where it's not very present and manifest it ourselves from the inside? So that's one example of going to the beach. Another is during the war in Vietnam, Thich Nhat Hanh, we call him Thai. Many of his students refer to him as teacher in Vietnamese, Thai. He created the School of Youth for Social Service, and there were thousands of young people being trained as social workers to go out into the countryside and help with agriculture, with education, with economy, building up villages and helping villagers. So there was a particular village, I think it was the village of Ben Tre in the south of Vietnam, that was bombed. And these young people helped to rebuild it. And it was bombed again. And once again, they rebuilt the village with the villagers. And it was bombed again. And again, they rebuilt it. And I think it happened at least 3, maybe 4 more times. And so it's kind of astounding to think of the heart and the sincerity with which these young people kept rebuilding a village that kept getting bombed over and over. And when I think of this story, I think, they weren't building the village, rebuilding it, expecting it to stay. They were rebuilding the village because that was what they needed to do. That was what was called for in that moment, to restore dignity and hope and to be peace in that moment. And so one of the lessons, one of the deep teachings of those courageous and committed young people is that peace is a practice of not relying on outcome for what you do to bring peace. Because if you only do something because you expect it to be successful, either you won't do very much, you'll be very conservative about where you put your energy, or as soon as something doesn't go the way you are expecting it, you lose all of your energy and fall into despair. But there's a sense of freedom in offering ourselves and working for peace without being attached to the outcome. Because even though it seems like what we might have done has failed, we don't really know in the end. It could be years, centuries later that the actual outcome of our effort is clear. We may not know it right away, even in our own lifetime. So one way to prevent burnout, to keep looking in this mirror of Perseus, the shield, is to work for peace, to be peace without being attached to what comes of it. Trusting that what we're doing is what we need to be doing, whether or not it turns out the way we'd like it to. Similarly, the way we work, the way we bring peace is to be very mindful of how we're using our energy. So I worked with a friend in the UK, Sophie Banks, who helped to start the Transition Town movement. It started in Totnes in Devon, the south east of England, southwest. And it's spread all over the world. Small communities that are organizing themselves to be carbon neutral in their transportation, in their housing, in their growing of food, in their economy. There's over 2,000 transition towns around the world now, but it started some 20, 25 years ago in Totnes. So she spoke about their first meetings as activists working for peace. And she said already in the very second meeting of Transition Town, she asked everyone there how many of them were working at a pace that would be sustainable for 6 months. No one raised their hand. So she knew that they had to change their way of working. As a group, they decided either they would have to cut back on their work or hire administrative staff to help. So they found a grant and were able to get help. So she was very happy that they were able to ask themselves this crucial question so early on. And this reflection led to starting a subgroup within the Transition Town, which was called the Heart and Soul Group, which was taking care of their, not just, there was this big task of how do you make this town not reliant on fossil fuel. But the Heart and Soul Group was on how do we keep taking care of ourselves and each other in this process, like really reflecting on how we're working together so that we don't burn out. So this Heart and Soul Group was responsible for making sure that every meeting they did a check-in just to see how everyone was doing before they got to the work that needed to be done, to really connect with each other, to take good care of each other. And then they started to alternate every doing meeting with a being meeting, which was where they would learn skills like nonviolent communication, where they would get to know each other, be there for each other, listen to each other, reflect on the group process itself. Were they really allowing everyone to have a voice? Was there, some kind of hierarchy forming that was creating an obstacle for the group? So even in their doing meetings, where they were looking at tasks, they always would begin with silence and then checking in and setting the agenda together. So they would have a timekeeper, a note taker, and then a keeper of the heart, who would all three of them support the facilitator. And the keeper of the heart would speak out when the atmosphere was tense, or note when the group needed to take a break. And at the end of a doing meeting, they would reflect, how was the meeting? How did it land for them? And they would check out. So each take a moment to share what they were leaving the meeting with. And then twice a year, they would have a day away, or a mini retreat, where they would look at issues of personal power. How was the organization going? Being self-reflective, looking at self-care as completely interconnected with caring for the community. So in this School of Youth for Social Service in Vietnam in the 60s, they did something similar. They were out in the villages taking care of people who were injured from bombing and war, and they, even though that work was very urgent, every week they would take one day of mindfulness to come together and nourish themselves. So, the work was endless, right? If it was all about the work, then no one should have taken a single day off. But every week they took a day of mindfulness. Because without that, they couldn't have done what they were doing the other 6 days of the week. I remember when I was living at Deer Park Monastery as a nun, we were having more and more people coming to our retreats. Even when Thai wasn't there to help lead a retreat, we'd have hundreds of people come. Even 1,000 people would come for a day of mindfulness. And I remember when Thai came to visit us, we talked to him about, how could we do all of this? How could we sustain ourselves with all that needed to be done to run? We were 30 monastics running a center that would sometimes serve 1,000 people. And he said to us, if our objective was to get things done and to finish our work, he said, we would never be done. The work is endless. There would never be an end. So that should not be the way that we approached our work, which is to get everything done. We just had to know that there was no way to do that we have to be peace in the midst of whatever our to-do list might still tell us needs to happen. That we really had to be about being present, being fully alive in every moment, not trying to get everything done, because that's impossible. So I want to speak now also about the importance of trusting our innate goodness as a kind of center that we can rest on when we're feeling pulled by all that needs to happen in order to manifest peace, justice, liberation, equity. All that can pull us out of our center into all of the urgency that is real, that does really need our action and our involvement and our wholehearted engagement. I remember as a child, we had a toy and it was called a Weeble Wobble. It was the shape of an egg. And it was kind of large. And it would stand up right on its sort of rounded bottom, and you could push it and it would go all the way, almost like it was going to fall over, but it wouldn't fall over. And then it would swing all the way back, and it looked like it was going to fall over, but it wouldn't, and it would slowly back and forth, weeble and wobble until it righted itself to the center again. It was this really cool toy, and it had some kind of weight at the bottom of it that kept it from falling all the way over. And for me, our Buddha nature, our inherent goodness, is this weight that keeps us from falling all the way over. We may swing really far to one side, really far to the other, but eventually we come back to our center, our groundedness. And I think being able to trust in this goodness, in this wisdom, in this beauty, in this ability to rest and let go, that is our Buddha nature. That's what allows us to stay steady and to be peace, to create peace now, to manifest peace, to have peace be the way. One beautiful definition the Buddha Thai gave of what the Buddha in us is it's our freshness, which is the opposite of burnout. So the Buddha is our freshness. It's our ability to stay clear-eyed or present to, open to stay connected to our questions and our wonder. So the great insight of the Buddha upon his enlightenment was that we all have the capacity to wake up. We are all actually Buddhas already. And I just want to invite us to pause and really take that in just for a moment. We all have the capacity to awaken. You, everyone on this call, everyone in your life, those you love, those you hate, those you're indifferent to, we all have the capacity to awaken. So whatever we want in the future, we want to live into it now. The Buddha is in us. We can rely on the Buddha in us right now, as this meditation invited us to. So we need to trust that the seed is already here. We don't have to go out and find it or do something for it to arise. It's here. So it's more about how do we be quiet so that it can show itself. How do we not do so that it can arise? This is from Nisargadatta Maharaj, a teacher in India. He said, "Be quiet, free from the obsession with what next. In the silence, something may be heard which is ordinarily too fine and subtle for perception." So it's in that pausing, being quiet, like going to the beach, like taking a day of mindfulness every week in the midst of a war. That quietness is what allows us to hear that deeper voice, that deeper truth of who we already are, of the peace that's already here. It's already possible for us. That we don't need to sacrifice this present moment in order for it to manifest in the future. So I will close my statements there, and I want to, before we move into the question and answer time, want to just remind everyone of what Caroline mentioned at the beginning with Donna, and that's that this Worldwide Insight offers an invaluable opportunity for people to connect live to Dharma teachings from anywhere in the world And if everyone gives a small donation, it could really support me and the other teachers each week, and the considerable costs of Worldwide Insight, which can only continue with your support. So please offer Dana using the button below the video. So you are now most welcome to ask questions, either live or written. And Caroline I'll read any questions that you write. And if you want to speak to me live on camera, you can let Caroline know and she'll bring you in. And I want to, while there is a little pause, I'm going to put a song in the chat, which is a song that I wrote and sang. And it's called There Is No Way to Peace, Peace is the Way. So it's on YouTube. You can listen to it at some point. It's a bit long. It's my epic song, something like 10 minutes. It felt like a download. I was just sitting outside and the words just were coming to me. And but it's, based on Thay's teachings. So hope you enjoy that song. I looked for the song of Chi Sing, Let the Buddha Breathe, Let the Buddha Sit, and I couldn't find it on YouTube. Maybe someone knows where it is and you can share the link with us. But it's a beautiful song. He has some CDs out, and that song is also on one of the CDs the monastics put together. Maybe Mountains or one of the Blue Cliff Monastery CDs. And I'll also invite you to sign up for my newsletter if you would like to hear my news and events and teachings I'm giving. I'll put that link in the chat as well if you want to receive a newsletter once every few months or so. So if you have any questions, please feel free. So nice to read your notes, lovely friends. Thank you for sharing. Lucy, Lori, everyone. Okay, we've got one written question. I'll read it out from Zahava. Not sure how to phrase this, but finding peace within and before doing good and peace for the world. What about finding peace with family members, relationships that are not peaceful? I'm aware that actions are the teachings, but sometimes the triggers from those close to you can really unearth the Buddha within. What do you suggest? Thanks. Wonderful question. Thank you, Zahava. That's often where it's hardest to connect with our Buddha, is in the midst of relationships that really trigger us, especially for many of us can be with our family. And part of resting in the Buddha within is to trust that we do have the Buddha nature, and so do our family members. And to pause, perhaps in that moment, when we want to say something back, when we want to do something out of our reactivity, to pause, to breathe, and to see what we can touch beneath the surface in that reactive moment. So if we can feel into our own bodies and notice what's really going on below the story of, all the things that have just been triggered, who they are and what's wrong with them, or Why is our relationship like this? But go beneath that and feel into what's the emotion there. Is it hurt? Is it anger? Is it disappointment? Is it despair? And feel that in our bodies. And really be there for ourselves in that emotion. And ask, maybe the action isn't something in relation to the family member, but in relation to our own pain. What does this pain need from me in this moment? How can I take good care of myself in this moment? It may be not being in that situation so close to that person who's so triggering. We may need to withdraw from that situation temporarily to really take care of ourselves, to let the weeble wobble find its center again. And if we are really there with the emotion, with all of our mindfulness, our love, our compassion, usually there's some insight that's born, something that arises that helps us find some way to move in relationship to the other person that's not based on our habit energy, that's not going to create more tension and repeat a pattern that's unhelpful between us. So often when there are these entrenched patterns and one person stops acting the way they usually do, right? It takes two to tango, then that gets disrupted and the other person can't. It's like if you want to pull a stick and you stop pulling, there can't be a fight about the stick if one person just lets go. So I hope that offers something by way of turning back and looking at our own experience and really taking care of that, so that whatever we do, say, or think after that difficult interaction has peace in it, has clarity in it. And it may take some time. We may need some help of some wise friends or mentors to help us see what's going on below the surface. But we can move from that place of greater clarity. So here's a question from Prady. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Can you speak to how the different modalities you work with, for example, play, nature, integrate with your practice? Thanks. Sure, Prady. Well, I have something I really love to share with people. It's called interplay. It's something that I'm a leader in and learned from Cynthia Winton-Henry and Phil Porter out of Oakland, California. You can look it up at interplay.org. But I bring that stream of wisdom into my mindfulness retreats and Buddhist practice, as it builds community, as it allows people to access body wisdom and to not operate only from the head, but to really experience what's here in the body and to play with each other and to find our truth in different ways, not only through words, but through voice, through movement, relaxation, ease. And actually, the life I live right now in Sri Lanka is pretty urban, and I love walking to the lake. There are lakes in the city that I live in Anuradhapura. There's the ocean. I love being at the ocean. But I don't have that much chance to be in touch with nature in the life I live now. But when I'm, whenever I can, it is something that nourishes me greatly, and I love to bring people, to be with people, to practice with people in nature, and to be outside, to do walking meditation, to do movement practices outside, and to really just pay attention to what's happening in the world around me, with the trees, with the animals, with the breeze, with the air, the colors. So I think all of those things are really important, and I think we can consider the natural world to be part of our Sangha. We need to spend time with it. We need to let ourselves be nourished by it. And when we have questions like the one you brought up, Sahava, it's very helpful to go to a place that you like in nature and let yourself be held there and see what nature offers you by way of insight or healing or spaciousness around the difficulty. So this is a comment by Cherry, not sure how you pronounce it. Hi, thank you for your teachings tonight. I was wondering, in your own meditation practice, do you have one technique that you mainly use, or do you have a variety you practice? I'm a bit overwhelmed by the number of different practices. Should I pick one and stick to it, or practice one technique for a while, then try others? So I have a question for you, Cherry. If you could write back to me in the chat, what have you done so far? I know you're wondering if you should pick one and stick with it, or practice one for a while and then try others. So that's your options. But I'm curious if you have done one for a while and how it was for you, or if you've done a number of them, switching it back and forth, and how that was for you. So would you just let me know what your experience has been? Okay, so you said mindfulness, body scan, and then thoughts, sounds, sensations. So can you share with me how that has worked for you? Has it been helpful to do the body scan and then do awareness of thoughts, sounds, sensations? Have you found that helpful to do one and then the other, like to alternate between different practices? And so you've also done metta practice and more recently Korean Zen koan. So share with me what's it been like to do these different practices? Do you feel like it's helpful? Yes, I alternate between metta, loving kindness, and body scan mindfulness. Really helpful. The koan practice, not so much. Okay, so the great mantra I've heard that I really appreciate about how to practice is whatever works. So you have to be the judge. If it's helpful for you to alternate loving kindness and then body scan and mindfulness, other thoughts, sounds, sensations, if you're finding that that works for you, great. If you don't find that koan practice works for you, you know, of course there's also the thing to be aware of is that sometimes a practice is difficult for a good reason, or there is a possibility that it could become very powerful for us, even though at the beginning it doesn't seem very helpful, or it's hard for us to really understand it or incorporate it. So it could be that the koan practice will be something you might want to try again later, or that, you know, maybe it's about approaching it from a different angle. But I'll tell you how I practice, because you asked me about me. I do alternate different kinds of practices. I find that sometimes, like on a retreat, it's helpful for me to have a focused practice of a particular kind, breath, body as like the basic, and then doing a daily loving kindness practice for one period of sitting out of the day. In my daily life, when I'm not on retreat, I'll often have an open meditation where I'll be with whatever's there in the moment. But then once, 2, 3 times a week, if I find that I really am having, I'm really tired, I'll do a meditation that's more about resting the body. Or if I want to do a loving kindness practice, I'll do a loving kindness practice. But I tend to have it be like open to what's arising in the moment without kind of a pre-decided focus. But then when that seems important, I will bring that in and do a particular kind of meditation. And I love learning new practices from different teachers. So I like to bring in something that inspires me and helps me learn something new every so often. So that's how I do it. And I think, trust the Buddha in you to guide you to what is really helpful for you. And I think having some consistency, something that, because it takes time to actually learn a practice well and to learn what works well for you in that practice. Like you might hear it as a guided meditation, but then I would encourage you over time to internalize it so that you're guiding yourself. Although it's wonderful to listen to guided meditations, and I do regularly, but when you do a practice over time for a while, you get familiar with how it works best for you, and you can adapt it, and you can make, changes that really work for you. So the advantage of sticking with one, even if it's a few that you alternate, metta, mindful, but you're doing those regularly. The advantage of that is that you get better and better at understanding them and, knowing where the obstacles are, knowing how to handle the obstacles, rather than always switching to something new. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you for your comment, Charlie, about doing activism work for some 40 years, grassroots campaigns, which all had an end goal: stop this, ban that, and none were achieved. I think perhaps the main gain was making connection with like-minded folk. And I see that what is important is the process, the way. Beautiful. Thank you for that reflection. We've got another 9 minutes, so if you have anything else you'd like to ask, or if you want to come on and ask a question, you are welcome to do so. And just to respond to what you wrote, Charlie, about none were achieved, I like what you said, that making connection with like-minded people was one of the achievements, and as I mentioned in the talk, we don't really know what the effect of our actions is finally, right? Like, there's a beautiful poem about Emma, is it Gonzalez, one of the young people who became a gun control activist after her high school in Florida, Parkland, had that horrible massacre. But the poem was about how she was a continuation of all these peace activists from earlier generations. And so all the work that everyone has done for peace, I think it's fueling the young people and the movements that are happening today. And so what we might have tried to do, or, in, the groups you were in that maybe didn't achieve that specific goal. It might be, something that's gone underground only to resurface in other movements today. Thank you for your comments, dear friends. Jane, Yvonne. Yeah, gardening meditation, most helpful to rebalance me when things get difficult. Beautiful. Yeah, it's so good to be with the earth. Grounding. And thank you, El Josie, for your reflections. Yeah. It's a question from Lori. Thanks for your teaching. I work with people in early recovery from addiction to substances. What simple teaching could you choose to get them started in their search for inner peace, to find the Buddha inside them? Well, thank you for your work with these wonderful people who are wanting to heal. It's so important. I think I would begin by affirming that they were on a path to healing, that there was some wisdom in them that had brought them to this work of recovery, and that whatever it was that brought them to that was really trustworthy and really worth honoring. So to really see the nobility in the ability to pause and turn around, to make a U-turn, that all of us, we all get stuck in different ways in our lives. We all get caught in unhealthy patterns, and that's not our destiny. No matter what we've done with our lives up until now, that doesn't have to be the last sentence of our lives. We can always shift. We can always turn things around. One visual that I love, also from Thai, he made a graph. If you think of the graph like this, and he said, even if we do something negative that brings the sum total of our acts to below zero, we do something, live our lives in a way that's really not helpful to us or to others. So we're down here below zero. He said, we can always do something after that brings beauty into the world, that brings goodness to ourselves, healing to others. And he said, if you combine this line and that line, you get an average, which is somewhere here, which is above zero. So it's never too late, and it's always possible to do beautiful things, to really do acts of love that heal. Just a quick story. There was a Vietnam veteran that came to Plum Village who had done some real atrocities in the war in Vietnam. He had killed children out of revenge for his whole platoon being ambushed and killed. So he was in a very disturbed state, and he wanted to just revenge, so he ended up killing children. Anyway, he came back to the US and was haunted by that, and was not able to even be around children, and couldn't sleep. And he had just extreme trauma from all that he had lived through as a very young person. He came to Plum Village. At those days in the 80s, Thai did retreats for Vietnam veterans every year. And this man was able to tell his story for the very first time to others. He had been keeping it inside for years and years. And he just felt like there was nothing he could do to change the horror that he had caused. And Tai told him, you can do something now. You can't change those children whose lives you took, but you can save children's lives now. You can help children now. There are children all over the world who are dying because they lack one pill that can prevent malaria, that can, stop malaria. He said, you can help those children now. And that Vietnam veteran ended up becoming a Zen priest and leads retreats now that many people have been part of, deep healing, deep transformation processes. So he found a way to shift completely the way his life was going, and lives his life in service to others. So it's never too late to shift completely the way our life is going. And it's beautiful work you're doing, Lori. Thank you. Thank you for that. So Marguerite, your question, could you comment on being overwhelmed by bad news and how to be more in touch with what is hopeful and going right in the world? Yes, very important question. I think this image of the shield that Perseus used with Medusa, I remember leading a retreat, and this was in Washington, D.C. area, one of the women attending said, this was right after the elections, she said she watched news all day long from many different, radio, TV, internet, her phone. And she said the retreat was one of the first breaks she'd taken from absorbing all of that news. And she said it was so important for her to reset her nervous system, to reset her mind and heart, to be aware of all the other things that were going on, like just the sound of the birds and the color of the sky and the smiles in the eyes of these people she was on retreat with. And she realized at that retreat that she was taking in way too much news. She was like, I don't need to hear this different versions of the same story 10 times in one day. So I think her insight was, there's a way to just get enough news and not go over. So I think knowing what's the right amount for us. And then for me, I feel having people to process things with and to do actions with, to put my determination into action is really important, so that it's not just taking in me and the computer, but figuring out how to be with other people. So there's wonderful groups like the Earth Holders in the Plum Village tradition, or One Earth Sangha in the Vipassana tradition, where Buddhists are getting together to do work for the planet. So you can put that action into something constructive. When you read something very disturbing about climate change, get with other people, even if it's on a Zoom call, or, if it's an article you're working on together, or if it's a retreat that you go to, but where you get to work and be in physical proximity or with other humans working towards something that you care about, that you believe in. So I think Sangha, and then channeling our energy into something nourishing and positive, is how we don't sink into that only bad news. So thank you so much, all of you. We're at our time now. Really appreciating reading everyone's comments, and thank you for your beautiful questions. Oh yes, an Extinction Rebellion, Charlie mentioned, that's a great group. I'm really inspired by them. So is the Sunrise Movement, young people working to end climate change, Black Lives Matter, so many good groups also working on bias and privilege and systemic racism. So thank you all for your practice, for your presence, for this chance to be peace together, to create peace right in this moment. Yes. Wishing all of you a very peaceful rest of your day or night. And thank you so much. Many blessings. Much love to you all.